He died drunk, drowning in regret on the 50th floor of the tower. But then he woke up, back inside his own 18-year-old body. He now carried the mind of a man who lived 20 years into the future, and he remembered everything, exactly how his sister died. In his first life, he was nothing but dead weight. He sat in front of his game screen all day. While his sister entered the tower alone, she came home covered in wounds. She paid the hospital bills all by herself. Then came that one night. They screamed at each other. She stormed into the tower in a pure rage, and she never came back. Kale woke up with a terrible headache. He groaned loudly. He looked around his messy bedroom. His body felt heavy, completely exhausted. It felt like someone had used him as a punching bag all night. He needed water. Kale forced himself up. He stepped off the bed. Suddenly, he slipped on the floor. He lost his balance. He fell backward. His head hit the ground with a loud crack. Everything went quiet. Then, a massive pain exploded inside his mind. It felt like his skull was splitting open. Endless memories and images forced their way into his brain. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The pain was unbearable. Then, it suddenly stopped. Kale lay on the floor, breathing heavily, covered in sweat. His eyes snapped open. He called out a name. "Lyra!" He stood up. He rushed to the door. At that exact moment, the door opened. A beautiful girl stood there. It was his sister, Lyra. Kale did not hesitate. He stepped forward. He hugged her tightly. Lyra was shocked. She tried to push him away. "Get off me, Kale! You stink!" But Kale held her tighter. He cried, "Thank Lord you are okay." Lyra noticed his shaking shoulders. Her anger disappeared. She patted his back gently. "What is wrong? Did something happen?" Kale could not explain his sudden emotions. Lyra looked at him. "Did you have a bad dream?" Kale froze. He nodded. "Yeah, a bad dream." He slowly stepped back. An awkward silence filled the room. Lyra broke the silence. "Food is ready," Kale quickly replied. "Okay, I will be there soon." She turned. She closed the door. Kale stood alone, feeling completely confused. Strange memories and painful feelings were filling his head. He felt a deep sense of loss, like something terrible had happened to Lyra. Then, a clear memory surfaced from deep within his mind. It was not a dream. It was his own memory, but it belonged to the future. 20 years in the future. Kale turned pale. He trembled in pure shock. The memories did not come gently. Suddenly, a massive wave of information crashed into Kale's mind. He dropped to the floor. He pulled his knees to his chest. His eyes were wide open, but he was seeing the future. He saw Lyra at 18, proudly showing off her new hunter badge. She smiled and said they did not need to worry about money anymore. But Kale did not feel happy for her in the memory. He felt jealous. The scene shifted fast. Years passed. Lyra kept entering the tower. She always returned covered in cuts and bruises. She worked. She cleaned. She paid for their mother's hospital bills. Meanwhile, Kale did nothing. He just sat in front of his screen and played games all day. Then, a dark memory appeared. Lyra returned home, completely exhausted and furious. They had a terrible fight. They shouted at each other. Kale said cruel, horrible words to her. Lyra turned away. She locked herself in her room. That was the last time he saw her alive. The next day, she entered the tower out of anger. She never returned. After her death, Kale's life fell apart. He spent years drowning in alcohol and regret. Finally, at 25, he decided to become a hunter, to pay the rising medical bills. But it was too late. His potential was gone. Soon after, his mother died. Years later, Kale died too, killed on the 50th floor of the tower. Kale gasped heavily. He opened his eyes. He was back in his room, drenched in sweat. He checked his body. There was no blood. There were no wounds. He was 18 again. He had the mind of a 38-year-old man, but his body was young. Kale wiped his tears. His expression became serious. Everything went wrong because of money. If they had money, Lyra would not have died. Kale clenched his fist. He muttered, "I will change it." He needed to enter the tower. In his past life, he started too late. But now, he was 18. His potential was at its peak. He stood up on shaky legs. He looked at his messy room. He rolled up his sleeves and started cleaning. 20 minutes later, the room was clean and fresh. Kale changed his clothes and walked out. Lyra was sitting at the dining table, eating quietly. Kale sat across from her. He picked up his spoon. The silence between them was heavy and awkward. Kale set his spoon down. He looked directly at her. Kale said, "Lyra, I want to register for the hunter exam." Lyra's hand paused halfway to her plate. She looked up. She met his eyes with a flicker of unease. She looked like she was bracing herself for something bad. Lyra said, "You know registration ends today, right?" Kale nodded. "I know." She hesitated before saying, "Kale, I just finished paying off Mom's hospital bills. I don't really have any money right now." Kale blinked in surprise. Old memories flashed in his mind. He remembered all the times he had forced her to give him money. He felt disgusted with his past self. He lowered his gaze. He went back to eating. They finished their food in heavy silence. Kale stood up first. He picked up the bowls and washed them in the sink. Lyra watched him, in complete shock. Before walking back to his room, Kale turned around. Kale said, "I wasn't asking you for money. I won't do that anymore. I'll handle the registration fee myself." He shut his door. He sat on his bed. He looked at his expensive gaming setup in the corner. He had bought it using Lyra's money. He felt another wave of guilt. Kyle muttered, "Sorry, but you have to go." He took photos of the setup. He listed everything online for a very low price. He needed quick cash. While waiting for buyers, he immediately started working out. Push-ups, core work, intense drills. His muscles burned, but he did not stop. By noon, his phone was blowing up with offers. Buyers came. They picked up everything within an hour. Kale checked his bank account. He had $30,000. He quickly opened the Hunter Association website. He paid the $10,000 registration fee. He filled out his details. He was officially registered. Kale looked at the remaining $20,000. He needed half of it for exam gear. He opened his banking app. He transferred $10,000 straight to Lyra's account. His phone rang instantly. It was Lyra. Lyra shouted, "What was that? You sent me money?" Kyle replied calmly, "Yeah, my contribution for the house." "Is there a problem?" She paused. Then she asked, "Where did you get it from?" Kale said, "I sold the setup." Lyra gasped. "You mean you're—" Kale cut her off. "I've got to go. Need to train." He ended the call. He smiled faintly. The exam was coming, and he had to be ready. Kale spent every day running up apartment stairs and training in the local park. He had no money for a gym or a professional trainer. However, he possessed 20 years of knowledge about building a strong body. Slowly, his movements became cleaner, and his stamina increased significantly. His relationship with his sister Lyra also began to change during their quiet meals. He noticed a faint hope in her eyes, instead of just pure fear. Kale swore to himself that he would fix his past mistakes. Days passed quickly until the morning of the Hunter exam finally arrived. Kale woke up before dawn. He put on his cheap second-hand leather armor. He carried no weapons, because they were too expensive to buy. He walked into the kitchen and found an empty apartment. Lyra left a note explaining that she already went to the association. Kale realized she was taking the dangerous exam too. He wanted to stop her, but they desperately needed the money. He promised to earn enough so she could leave this dangerous life. Kale ate quickly. He took the transit to the massive Hunter Association building. He walked inside the sterile lobby and stood in the growing registration line. Soon, his turn came at the front desk. The receptionist asked, "Purpose of visit?" Kale replied, "Hunter exam." She typed his registration number and looked up. The receptionist asked, "Is this your first time taking the exam?" Kyle replied, "Yes." She made a quick phone call. She told him to wait nearby. While waiting, Kyle thought about the 3 stages of the upcoming exam. The first stage was the critical mana affinity test. Years ago, mysterious rifts opened. They released dangerous monsters and mana. Humans discovered a massive tower inside these rifts that granted powerful abilities. Many people became hunters, but many also died during the trials. The association discovered that some people simply could not contain mana safely. Therefore, they created the affinity test to save lives. Suddenly, an employee called him, "Hey, this way." Kale stepped forward. It was time. A staff member led Kale down a sterile corridor. They entered a small white room. In the center sat a clear crystal slab. Following instructions, Kale placed his hand on the surface. A sudden warmth rushed through his body, scanning him internally before retreating. The crystal glowed a soft blue light. The staff member noted the result. He escorted Kale to a large waiting room, filled with about 30 other candidates. As Kale found a corner, a broad-shouldered boy approached him with a wide smile. The boy introduced himself as Adam. He assumed Kyle was nervous about failing. Before Kyle could correct him, a girl named Zoe intervened. She scolded Adam for crowding the newcomer. Kyle learned that Adam and Zoe had both failed the exam the previous year. They had been training together ever since. When Kale revealed he had only prepared for a few days, both were completely stunned by his recklessness. Suddenly, an official called out registration numbers. Adam and Zoe left with the first batch. Soon after, Kale's number was called. He was led into a classroom for the written test. The exam covered basic monster strategies and herbs. For someone with Kale's 20 years of future knowledge, the test was effortless. He finished within minutes. He moved directly to the final stage, the combat assessment. Instead of a real arena, Kale entered a room lined with VR pods. The staff hooked him up. He instantly materialized inside a vast virtual clearing. A digital screen prompted him to choose a weapon. Since Kale had no personal gear, he selected a standard sword. Light gathered in his hand, forming a usable blade. The countdown began for the first wave of monsters. Kale tightened his grip. He sharpened his focus. It was time to test his training. The countdown hit 0. The virtual forest shifted. A small green goblin stepped out from the undergrowth. It carried a crude bone dagger stained with grime. Kale took a quiet breath. He knew goblins were weak, but they fought dirty with poisoned blades. With 50 floors of future experience in his mind, Kale raised his sword. The goblin shrieked and lunged. Kale didn't rush. He stepped aside at the last second and delivered a clean swing, instantly decapitating the monster. The screen flashed. First wave cleared. The corpse dissolved. 2 more goblins appeared. They split up to surround him. Kale moved first, rushing the goblin on his left. He kicked its wrist, disarmed it, and smashed his sword's pommel into its temple. Turning with the momentum, he blocked the second goblin's strike and drove his blade into its side. Both were down. The waves kept coming. 3 became 4, then 5. Kale managed his positioning carefully, cutting through their formations. However, by the 8th wave, fatigue set in. 8 goblins circled him. Kale was a fraction too late. As he cut one down, a sharp pain exploded in his back. A goblin had stabbed him. The toxin spread instantly, making his limbs heavy. Another goblin lunged, slicing his neck. The screen flashed. Candidate eliminated. Kale's eyes snapped open as the VR pod unlocked. He breathed steadily. 8 waves. Not bad, but not enough. He stepped out. He followed a staff member back to the front desk. The receptionist checked her screen. She looked up. "Congratulations. You passed the hunter exam on your first attempt." Whispers spread through the waiting queue behind him. She slid an ID card across the desk. Kyle picked it up. He saw his rank F+. It was a solid start. The receptionist explained, "This ID includes a 1-week rift permit. After your awakening, you can return for a reassessment." Kyle nodded. He slipped the card away and asked, "Where's the nearest rift I can access with my rank?" Kale walked out of the Hunter Association, ignoring the receptionist's annoyed expression. She had warned him to wait and prepare, but Kale brushed her off. To her, he was just another reckless rookie. To Kale, more preparation was just a waste of time. He booked a transit and headed straight toward his destination, the MASH world. During the quiet ride, Kale pulled out his phone. He logged into the Hunter Association forum, using his new ID to research the rift. The threads were clear. The MASH world was a toxic swampland, where the air itself was lethal over time. Its most common monsters were mud slimes, creatures that hid perfectly in the muck and spat flesh-melting acid. Kale didn't underestimate the danger. He knew lower-ranked rifts were only safe because their hazards were predictable. The toxic air could be managed with a mask, and the slimes were mostly passive unless provoked. Looking out the window, the scenery turned barren and lifeless. The leaked mana from the rift had completely poisoned the surrounding land. The transit stopped. Kale stepped out. He faced the rift, a dark, endless tear carved into reality itself. He walked through the portal, bracing himself as a violent force distorted his senses. A moment later, he opened his eyes inside a massive stone hall. A heavily armed guard stepped forward. "ID?" Kyle handed it over. The guard scanned it. He looked up, surprised. "You're a new hunter?" Kyle nodded. "Just passed the exam." The guard signaled his partner. Soon, a broad-shouldered hunter named Taras arrived to act as his guide. Taras led Kyle out of the hall and into a massive fortress city surrounded by high walls. Taras explained that the fortress was built to keep monsters from escaping into the human world. He noticed Kyle lacked equipment. "You don't have a mask?" Kyle replied. "I was planning to get one here." Taras laughed, explaining that the association provided basic masks for first-timers. He admired Kale's guts for jumping straight into a rift right after the exam. Kale kept quiet. choosing not to mention how badly he needed the money. They walked to a transport hub, filled with massive eagle-like flying mounts. No flying monsters in this rift, Taurus explained, making air travel the safest option. They mounted the giant bird. With a powerful beat of its wings, they soared into the sky. The fortress city shrank beneath them, replaced by the endless stretch of the toxic green marsh. And, somewhere ahead, rising from the fog, the tower awaited. The wind roared relentlessly. The giant eagle flew at a terrifying speed. Kale held on for dear life, digging his fingers into its feathers, while Taurus guided the beast with practiced ease. Soon, a massive black structure pierced the sky like a giant blade. The tower. It didn't reflect light. It swallowed it. They landed at the base. Taurus gave Kale a final warning. Place your hand on the surface to enter the tutorial. I'll wait here for 12 hours. If you're not out by then, he left the dark truth unsaid. Kale nodded. He touched the smooth obsidian wall. Instantly, a crushing, suffocating pressure slammed into him, like a heavy judgment. Then, the world vanished. Kale opened his eyes in an endless gray space. A screen floated before him. Welcome, challenger. Please select your weapon. Kale chose a sword. Steel materialized in his hand. The gray space warped, transforming into a ruined, smoking city, smelling of burning flesh. Behind him, a featureless, dark humanoid figure appeared. Tutorial mission, protection. Objective, defend the designated target and survive. Kale cursed. It was an escort mission. Suddenly, two masked assassins materialized. One lunged at Kale, while the other bypassed him, sprinting straight for the defenseless target. Kale spun. He yanked the humanoid out of harm's way and parried a strike from behind. He drove his blade into the first assassin's stomach, then pivoted to smash his sword hilt into the second attacker's face, finishing him off with a clean thrust. The waves kept coming without rest. The enemies didn't just increase in number. They grew smarter, faster, and more precise. Kale fought furiously, but the relentless pressure eventually overwhelmed him. A blade slipped past his guard, aiming straight for his skull. Everything froze. The ruined city dissolved back into the gray void. Tutorial complete. Performance rating B+. Proceeding with awakening. Kale exhaled, satisfied with a solid B+. But suddenly, the screen flickered a violent crimson. Error. Unknown variable detected. Awakening sequence interrupted. Reassessing performance. New performance rating SSS. Before Kale could even process the shock, an overwhelming surge of energy flooded his body. It was intense, blinding, far beyond human limits. His senses faded as the raw power reshaped his entire being. When his awareness finally returned, Kale felt completely changed, immensely stronger. He looked up at the final screen, floating in the dark. Awakening complete. Class awakened, Void Sovereign. Kale stepped out of the tower, immediately feeling the oppressive pressure vanish. Taurus was waiting by the giant eagle. He grinned in relief. Well, I'll be damned. You made it. He admitted that most rookies never pass the tutorial. Kale nodded. They flew back to the fortress base. After parting ways, Kale took a transit home. Looking out the window at the city lights, a confident smile crossed his face. He whispered, "Damn, I'm actually overpowered." He opened his status screen to inspect his new power. His base stats were absurd, all crossing the elite threshold of 10. His class, Void Sovereign, granted him ridiculous perks. Void Absorption allowed him to steal monster traits. Null Field blocked any unwanted magical probing. And Echo Strike dealt a massive 180% explosive damage on every third hit. But the most broken part was his unique talent, Infinite Reward Multiplier. It automatically multiplied every single reward he received, from twice to literally unlimited amounts. With this, rapid growth was guaranteed. The transit stopped at his old, worn-out apartment building. The area was cheap but dangerous, due to high ambient mana leakage from the rifts. Kale's expression hardened. That exact mana pollution was what made his mother terminally ill. He walked upstairs. He entered the apartment. Lyra was on the couch. Kale broke the silence, asking how her exam went. She revealed she passed as an E rank. When Kale mentioned he passed too, and already cleared the tower tutorial, Lyra jumped up in pure terror. "Do you have no regard for your life?" she cried, her voice trembling with fear. She grabbed his hand, tears streaming down her face, begging him to stop being a hunter. She offered to buy him a gaming setup, if he just stayed safely in his room. "I'm still struggling with Mom's condition," she sobbed. I can't lose you too. Kale felt his chest tighten. He pulled her into a warm hug, comforting her until she cried herself to sleep. He carefully carried her to bed and returned to his room. Her desperation meant she had already accepted their mother's upcoming death from mana sickness, but Kale knew from his future memory that, in exactly 3 months, an elixir capable of curing any illness would appear at an auction. The price was an impossible 3 billion credits. Kale sat down, a sharp smile forming on his lips. With his broken multiplier talent, that impossible sum was now entirely within his reach. The next morning, Kyle woke up early, feeling lighter and stronger. The apartment was completely silent. Lyra was still sound asleep after her emotional breakdown from the night before. Not wanting to wake her, Kale left a short note on the fridge. Went out for a bit. I'm fine. Don't worry. He slipped out quietly and took a transit to the Hunter Association. He headed straight to the 3rd floor exchange center. It looked exactly like a high-end bank. Kale walked up to a counter to convert his hard-earned tower coins into real-world cash. The exchange rate was simple. 1 tower coin for 10 credits. His 800 coins instantly became 8,000 credits. Kale left the building officially richer, but he knew this money wouldn't last. Climbing the tower required serious preparation. Basic weapons were provided for free on the lower floors. So, he decided to save his money and prioritize buying potions instead. He walked over to a cheap private shop nearby. He bought 3 health potions and 5 mana potions. The total came to 3,500 credits, leaving him with just over 1,000. He shook his head. At this rate, saving 3 billion credits for Mom's elixir is going to be a nightmare. But he had no regrets. You can't make money if you're dead. Returning home, he found the apartment empty. Lyra had already left for the day, but she had cooked for him and left a note. Eat well and stay safe. Kyle smiled. He finished the warm food and headed to his room. It was time to enter the tower for real. Thanks to his awakening, he didn't need to physically travel to a rift anymore. Once a day, hunters could teleport directly inside from anywhere. He focused his mind. A screen materialized. Do you wish to enter the tower? Yes/no, Kale answered. Yes, the world shifted instantly. He opened his eyes inside a plain stone safe room. Suddenly, Kale noticed a tiny glowing blue figure floating right in front of him. It was a fairy with delicate fluttering wings. The creature spoke up in a loud, clear voice. Greetings, Challenger. I am Iona, your personal tower guide. Kyle blinked in confusion. Search his future memories as he might. He had never heard of hunters getting personal guides on the 1st floor. Iona quickly explained the truth. Because his tutorial assessment shattered all standard parameters, the tower adjusted and assigned her to him. Kyle's mind raced. His SSS rank evaluation was the highest in human history. No wonder nobody else had ever received a guide. However, instead of feeling proud, Kale grew suspicious. His SSS rank was the result of that strange red error screen. An unknown variable had interfered with the tower itself. If something possessed the power to manipulate the tower, it was incredibly dangerous. Was it targeting him? He pushed the dark thought aside for now. He looked at the floating fairy and asked, So, Iona, what exactly can you do? Without hesitation, Iona began her explanation. She could answer questions within her authority level, provide hints for upcoming floor challenges, and manage his start room. Kale asked what made his start room special. Iona explained that hers existed in a stable space, meaning Kale could safely store items, or modify the environment. Kale smiled. This solved the massive issue of limited inventory space. Kale then asked about her authority. Iona explained that guides were created by the Tower Master. When Kale asked who that was, she stated, insufficient authority. She looked down sadly, adding that she must seem useless. Kale dismissed her worries and asked how to increase her authority. Iona explained that his performance directly affected her. As he grew stronger, her capabilities would expand. She then handed him an unclaimed reward box from his tutorial. Kale touched it. The screen flashed. Reward claimed, plus 200 tower coins, plus 50 EXP. Infinite reward, multiplier, activated. Multiplier, times 5. Adjusted reward, plus 1,000 tower coins, plus 250 EXP. A subtle surge of energy flowed through him. Kale leveled up twice, reaching level 3. His base stats shot up even higher, and he gained 6 unallocated stat points. He dismissed the interface It was time for the next step. A new prompt appeared. Please select your trial difficulty. Normal/nightmare/hell. Most hunters chose normal for safety, while elites chose nightmare for better rewards. Nobody chose hell. Kale hesitated, but he knew 3 months was too short to earn 3 billion credits on nightmare. He needed absolute power. Fast. Kale selected hell. The world shifted instantly, and Kale realized something was horribly wrong. He wasn't standing on solid ground. His fingers were dug into rough stone, and his boots pressed against a narrow cliffside ledge. Below him was a bottomless gorge swallowed by thick fog. The screen flashed. Floor 1, Hell difficulty. Mission, survival, reach the cliff's summit. Warning, you have disturbed the Iron Leg Queen's territory. Her brood is coming. A terrifying scraping sound echoed from below. Kale looked down. His breath caught. Dozens of massive dog-sized creatures were sprinting up the rock. Their legs were sharpened metal spikes, digging into the stone with terrifying speed. Fear hit him, but regret was a luxury he couldn't afford. The summit was 200 meters above. Kyle had never climbed a mountain, but his awakened strength and stamina gave him a massive advantage over ordinary humans. His gaze hardened. He couldn't die here. His sister and mother were counting on him. Kale reached up, gripped a jagged edge, and pulled himself upward. Kale threw everything he had into the climb, but raw strength wasn't enough. The cliff face was uneven and crumbling, slowing his progress. Behind him, the terrifying scraping sounds grew louder. The iron leg spiders were closing in fast. They were perfectly adapted to this vertical terrain, using their sharp, spike-like legs to anchor themselves with ease. Suddenly, the rock vibrated beneath Kale's foot. A chill ran down his spine. A massive spider caught up. It coiled its legs to leap. Kale reacted on pure instinct, letting go of his right hand to swing his body sideways. A split second later, the spider slammed into the rock where he had just been, shattering a massive chunk of stone. Capitalizing on the opening, Kale twisted. He kicked the creature with everything he had. The spider lost its grip and plummeted into the fog. He kept climbing, but another spider lunged, grazing his leg with its sharp leg. Pain flared as blood spilled. Hanging with one hand, Kale ripped a loose stone from the cliff. He smashed it into the monster's head. It was a distraction. He immediately pulled a potion vial from his inventory and threw it. The vial shattered, spilling a thick green corrosive liquid that ate through the spider's shell. It shrieked and fell, splashing onto other spiders below. Multiple kill notifications flashed in his vision. He only had 2 vials left. The relentless onslaught continued until Kale's gear was torn, and his body was covered in cuts and bruises. He needed a gamble. He activated his skill, Sovereign's Claim, hoping to steal a spider's climbing trait. Instead, the screen flashed. Target selected, solid rock, trait extracted, endurance +1. Kale nearly cursed out loud. Out of all the spiders, it chose a rock. But right then, his other perk kicked in. Monster Essence integrated times 17. Strength +8, endurance +5, agility +10. Void absorption had kicked in from his previous kills. The massive stat boost caught him completely off guard. If other hunters knew he could gain stats just by killing, they would murder him out of pure jealousy. With his renewed strength, Kale pushed forward. He climbed faster, struck harder, and watched the distance to the summit shrink. Finally, his fingers locked onto the top edge. With the last of his strength, he pulled himself over. He collapsed onto solid ground. Breathing heavily, the screen materialized. Hell difficulty cleared. A rank. Multiplier times 5 activated. 4,200 EXP, 3,000 coins. Level up times 5. Kyle checked his status screen. His level had jumped all the way to level 8. His stats had increased dramatically, and he still had 21 free stat points to spend. Kale stared at his status screen for a moment before closing it. For any normal hunter, gaining 5 levels in a single run would be a dream come true. But Kale wasn't satisfied. He knew this strength still wasn't enough for his ultimate goal. Suddenly, the reality of the trial twisted and faded away. The familiar cold stone walls of his start room returned. Kale pushed himself up from the floor, his muscles aching from the brutal climb. Iona floated over immediately, her face lighting up with excitement. "Congratulations, challenger. You've completed your first tower trial and performed exceptionally." Kyle frowned, remembering his A-rank rating. Iona explained that hell difficulty didn't follow standard rules, meaning an A rank was considered exceptional. Kale nodded. Choosing hell difficulty blindly had been reckless. It truly lived up to its brutal name. Iona raised her hand, manifesting a small gift box. You have received an additional reward. Would you like to claim it now? Kale shook his head, sending the box into his inventory. Later, he replied. Right now, he desperately needed rest. The stone walls dissolved. Kale materialized back in his bedroom. He stripped down to his underwear. He pulled a health potion and a stamina potion from his inventory and drank them both. He collapsed onto his bed and instantly fell asleep. When Kale woke up, the sun was already setting. The extreme exhaustion was gone, but his body was still covered in dull purple bruises. He drank another potion to speed up his healing. Leaning against the headboard, Kyle reflected on his performance. Clearing the first floor had relied too much on luck. A victory decided by luck was just a warning. If he wanted to survive the completely unrecorded and unpredictable dangers of hell difficulty, he needed to be better prepared. He pulled up his inventory. Staring at the unclaimed gift box, he muttered, "Let's see if I get lucky." Kale opened his status screen. He was already level 8. His stats had increased across the board. But that wasn't the shocking part. Thanks to his infinite reward multiplier, his tower coin balance had already exceeded 12 million. Kale reached into his inventory. He tapped the floating bonus gift box. The screen blinked. "Do you want to claim the reward?" He selected yes. A massive wall of text exploded in front of his eyes. Kale claimed his reward, 3,500 tower coins, and 3 pieces of mithril ore. Then, his infinite reward multiplier activated, multiplying everything by 3,700 times. His reward instantly exploded to nearly 13 million tower coins, and even his mithril ore was upgraded, from F rank to C+ rank. Kale stared at the screen, his mouth hanging open. Over 12 million tower coins. Converted, that was well over 100 million credits. Even the mithril ore had upgraded to C+ grade, a rare mana conductor worth tens of millions on its own, totaling over 200 million credits in a single run. The impossible 3 billion credit goal for his mother's elixir suddenly felt within reach. Dizzy with excitement, he stood up to take a cold shower. Suddenly, his bedroom door burst open. A sharp-eyed blonde girl stepped inside. Ezra, Lyra's closest friend. In his previous life, Ezra blamed him for Lyra's death. Yet, she still helped care for his mother. Ezra explained that Lyra was worried about him after the tower. Before Kale could object, she placed a hand on his abdomen. A soft green light appeared. She was a healer. Warmth spread through Kale's body. His bruises disappeared within seconds. Ezra stepped back with a satisfied smile. "So, how do you feel now?" Kale stretched his arms, realizing the muscle stiffness and purple bruises were entirely gone. Ezra's high-tier healing magic was far more effective than any standard potion. He thanked her. Ezra smiled, teasingly complimenting his physique. Kale jokingly asked if she possessed a legendary healer class, but her playful demeanor vanished instantly. Her expression turned tight. She abruptly left the room. Kale was baffled by her sudden mood swings, wondering if she had a split personality. Left alone, Kale walked over to his dusty mirror and flexed. His intense training and rapid leveling had sculpted a perfectly lean, athletic physique. He pushed back his rough brown hair, feeling incredibly confident. Good looks, an elite class, and millions of tower coins in his pocket. He was essentially a prize, but his self-admiration was cut short when the door slammed open again. Kale quickly covered himself. As a blushing Ezra reappeared at the doorway, she stammered, "You should go check the hospital. I think something's wrong," before running off again. Kale's playful mood turned serious. If something was wrong at the hospital, his first thought was money, but Ezra's panicked reaction hinted at something far worse. He showered, dressed, and took a 20-minute transit east to the massive, polished hospital, funded by the Hunter Association. He entered the bright lobby. He took the elevator straight to the 5th floor, where his mother's ward was located. As the elevator ascended, guilt weighed heavily on his chest. After their father disappeared, his mother had raised him and Lyra alone. Yet, when she fell ill with terminal mana sickness, Lyra had carried the entire emotional and financial burden by herself. Kale realized he had been a terrible son, and an even worse brother, shielded by his sister's silent sacrifices. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Kale stepped into the quiet hallway. He walked toward the ward, but just as he reached the corner of the L-shaped corridor, Lyra's voice echoed from down the hall. The hospital corridor was completely silent, except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Kale stepped around the corner and froze. Standing in front of his mother's private ward was a disgusting, bloated man in an expensive white suit, the hospital director. He was leaning inappropriately close to Lyra, a vile smirk plastered across his face. He was shamelessly exploiting his power, threatening to cut off her mother's treatment, unless Lyra complied with his disgusting demands. Lyra stood her ground, her face pale, but her expression fierce. She even threatened to report him. The director simply laughed in her face, mocking her naivety, stating that the world belonged to the powerful. As the monster stepped closer, demanding she satisfy him, a voice colder than ice shattered the silence. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The director froze. Kale walked forward, his expression completely blank, but his eyes radiated pure killing intent. For the first time, the director felt genuine fear. Looking into Kale's eyes, he realized this wasn't a bluff. Lyra grabbed Kale's arm. She wanted the director punished, but she feared what Kale might do. Kale forced himself to take a slow breath. He pulled out his phone. His gaze locked onto the trembling director. "I recorded everything," Kale said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Every single word. Get out of my sight before I stop controlling myself." Terrified, the director fled, his round body awkwardly scrambling down the hallway. Kale turned to Lyra. "How long?" he asked, his voice low and restrained. Lyra lowered her head in silence. The realization of how long she had suffered alone broke Kale's heart. He stepped forward and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I've been a terrible brother, but I promise, I'll fix things from now on." Lyra broke down, crying softly against his chest. When she finally pulled away, she begged him not to get involved and let her handle it. Kale firmly refused, looking directly into her eyes. He admitted he had been selfish in the past, but declared he was done letting her carry the burden alone. He told her to go back inside to care for their mother. When Lyra asked if he wanted to come, guilt flashed across Kale's face. He shook his head, whispering that he couldn't face her just yet. Lyra nodded and went inside. Kale watched the door close, let out a tired sigh, and walked down the empty hallway. Kyle walked down the hallway, his blood boiling with rage. Part of him wanted to turn back and break every bone in the director's body, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had the recording. Normally, that was enough to destroy someone like the director. The problem wasn't proof, it was power. Men like that always had connections, and they never forgot humiliation. Sooner or later, the director would retaliate. Kale stopped. A troubling thought crossed his mind. He could protect himself. But what about Lyra? What about their mother? Trying to keep Lyra away from the hunter world was a mistake. This world was a jungle. The weak had no voice. If Lyra remained weak, she would always be vulnerable. A new plan formed in his mind. If he couldn't remove the danger, he would make sure Lyra could survive it. He would make her an iron fortress, a tank nobody could break through. With his tower coins and infinite reward multiplier, he would give her the best armor, skills, and protective artifacts available. Lost in thought, Kale stepped into an elevator. As he walked out on the lower floor, he accidentally bumped into someone. Bang, books and papers scattered across the floor. Kale immediately crouched down to help. As they gathered the documents, Kale finally got a good look at the man. He looked exhausted, long, messy hair, dark circles under his eyes. Then, a sudden sense of familiarity hit him. Kale frowned. The man nodded awkwardly and headed toward the elevator. But just before the doors closed, Kale noticed the name tag on his coat. Dun Duncan. Kale froze. Future memories surfaced instantly. Dun Duncan, the legendary alchemist who would one day change the world, the creator of countless life-saving potions. But why did he look so defeated? Realizing this was a massive opportunity, Kale rushed into the elevator before the doors closed. "You're done, right? I heard you're researching a cure for mana sickness." Dun's expression changed instantly. His eyes narrowed. That research was a closely guarded secret. "Who are you? How do you know my name? And how do you know about my research?" Kale's heart sank. He had been too careless. To him, Dun Duncan was a famous historical figure. But right now, nobody should know about that research. Now, he had to fix this misunderstanding. before the future legend decided he was an enemy. Kale steps into the elevator. He notices the tension on Dunn's face. The man is trying not to panic, but his eyes give him away. To break the awkward silence, Kale introduces himself. He mentions his mother is at the hospital, and adds that he heard rumors about Dunn's secret research. Dunn stares at him in silence. Nobody should know about his project. Suspicion immediately kicks in. Dunn asks if the director sent him. The air in the elevator instantly turns cold. Kale's eyes fill with rage. Why the hell would I work for that bastard? Dunn is shocked by the intense reaction. It is clear this young man hates the corrupt director even more than he does. Kale quickly calms down and apologizes, mentioning a bad run-in with that fat pig. Dunn chuckles, agreeing that every meeting with the director is a nightmare. But Dunn gets serious again. He asks what Kale really wants. If it is for the media, he is too late. The research already failed. Kale frowns and asks why. Dunn leans against the wall, sighing heavily. Funding. No money means no research. The director cut him off long ago. Dunn used his own savings, but now he is completely broke. The project is dead. The elevator dings and the doors slide open. Dunn steps out, but turns back to Kale with a tired smile. He apologizes for disappointing him, saying he has nothing left to offer. What if I provide the funding? Dunn freezes mid-step. He slowly turns around, completely shocked. Kale meets his gaze calmly, and repeats that he wants to fund the research. Dunn asks why, but the elevator gives a warning beep. Dunn rubs his forehead, and tells Kale to follow him to his office. They walk down a quiet hallway and enter a small room. The office is pure chaos, packed with piles of books and scattered papers. Dunn awkwardly apologizes for the mess, but Kale says it is fine. They sit down, and Dunn gets straight to the point. He asks why Kale wants to invest in a failed project. Kale shrugs, saying he has confidence in him. Seeing Dunn's hesitation, Kale decides to share a truth to lower his guard. He explains that his mother has late-stage mana sickness. This investment is his hope. It is a perfect backup plan, just in case the rumored legendary elixir fails. Dunn's expression softens, but he quickly warns Kale that this kind of research is incredibly expensive. Suddenly, a transparent notification screen pops up right in front of Dunn. His words catch in his throat. He stares at the screen in pure disbelief. I just transferred 100,000 tower coins to you, Kale says casually. That should be enough for now. Dunn completely freezes. His hands tremble. This is way more than enough. Kale stands up, ready to leave. They quickly exchange contact information to discuss details later. Even after Kale leaves, Dunn just sits there, staring blankly at the floating screen. Kale returns to the lobby and immediately books transit to his next destination, the Hunters Association. The third floor of the Hunters Association is packed with people. Hunters are everywhere, talking about tower runs or waiting to exchange coins. Kale joins a short queue. Minutes later, he reaches the counter. A female staff member greets him with a professional smile. She hands him a silver transaction device. Kale places his hand on it and inputs the amount. 500,000 tower coins. The woman processes the exchange, but her face suddenly changes. The records show Kale became a hunter just 2 days ago. How could a newbie possess this much wealth? She wisely keeps quiet and finishes her job. But Kale notices her shock. He sighs inwardly. This is the danger of getting rich too quickly without power or influence. People start asking questions. Luckily, he didn't exchange everything. Kale knows the Hunters Association is not as righteous as it seems. Greed and corruption are everywhere. If the higher-ups find out about his massive wealth, dangerous attention will follow. That is the last thing he wants. If powerful people investigate him, his biggest secret could be exposed. At best, he would lose his life. At worst, he would become a brainless slave, forced to farm wealth for others inside the tower forever. His face turns serious at the thought. After completing the transaction, Kale walks out of the building. His bank account now holds 5 million credits. Finally, it is time to start his real plan. Kale pulls out his phone. He opens his banking app and transfers 1 million credits to Lyra without hesitation. He originally wanted to buy her gear himself, but realized he would probably choose the heaviest armor possible, something built like an iron bucket to survive explosions, rather than actual combat. Letting her choose her own equipment is definitely the smarter move. Before he can even type an explanatory message, his phone vibrates violently. It's Lyra. Anticipating her panic, Kale wisely holds the phone away from his ear. "What the hell, Kale?" Her voice explodes from the speaker. "Where did you get that much money from?" Kale tries to answer, but she cuts him off, demanding to know what he sold, before realizing he owns nothing of that value. Her imagination runs wild, accusing him of stealing or scamming someone. Kale interrupts her, telling her to take a deep breath. After a temporary silence, Kale explains calmly that he simply got lucky with the rewards from his first tower trial. Lyra falls silent again. She clearly doesn't buy it. Newbies usually get a few thousand credits. 1,000,000 is unheard of, but Kale can't tell her the truth about the mysterious entity that interfered with his tutorial or his reward multiplier talent. He doesn't want to risk offending the all-powerful Tower Master by spreading secrets. Lyra sighs heavily. "If you say you didn't do anything illegal, then I'll believe you." Her voice softens, full of genuine concern. "But please be careful. Don't do anything that'll hurt you." Kyle smiles, joking that he doesn't plan on dying since he still has a cute little sister to take care of. Lyra mutters an insult under her breath, her anxiety fading. Kyle instructs her to spend the money on top-tier protective gear and emergency supplies for her upcoming tutorial, assuring her that he still has plenty of cash left. Before hanging up, he mentions he is running the tower again tonight and needs to rest before midnight. Lyra pauses, quietly telling him to stay safe, and ends the call. Now, it is time to gear up himself. His cheap secondhand leather armor is completely useless. For weapons, Kale prefers versatility over specialization. He wants whatever kills efficiently. He goes on a massive shopping spree, showing absolutely no restraint. Combat swords, compact battle axes, long spears, and throwable short spears. He blows nearly 500,000 credits instantly. Next, he stocks up on potions, essential supplies, and even reinforced climbing rope. After his last trial, he doesn't trust the tower to be rational. Finally, it's time for armor. Kale knows exactly what he wants. He books a transit ride to a second-tier district. Unlike his trashy hometown, the air here is fresh, and the streets are pristine, free from heavy mana pollution. The vehicle stops in front of a massive, sleek silver-black building with a bright sign, the Spectre Guild. Elite hunters in expensive gear walk past with relaxed confidence. Kyle ignores them all. He walks straight to the reception desk. The receptionist greets him with a professional smile. Kale looks her in the eye and says calmly, "I'm here for the Spectre X Nano bracelet."